We're delighted to have you back to this, our show, Humane Architecture on Think Tech Hawaii. And you are our 280, well, this show is the 287th show in which accumulated you are. I wanted to say, thanks to Michael, our producer, we see down there. So thank you for that. So we're into the 20th half hour already with our panel here being comprised of one guy who grew up here, DeSoto Brown, who we see in his childhood home. So one Hawaiian and two Haoles, one of them, Matt Noblett, being in this Boston Behnisch office, who has experience here for 3 decades at least. And the other Haole, which is me, Martin Despang, and his Waikiki Grand, only 1 decade. And we are going to continue to talk about how things from somewhere else could enrich us here on our most remote, in the middle of nowhere and also / everywhere islands of Hawaii. All right, guys. So last time when we left about 3 weeks ago, you had a lot of travel to do as a busy architect, Matt. We were complimenting the new Pritzker Prize winner on his award, rightly so. That's David Chipperfield, and we talked about him. And we say for now you coming back, and that's at the bottom right there, show quoted here. The one that's the closest to us, because Chipperfield is to me as sort of my informal mentor, but this one here is close to us in many ways. And for you, Matt, as related to the founding father of your guys' firm, Günther Behnisch, because that's Frei Otto that he started out with in 72 in our Munich. And Frei got the award around when he passed away. And I will never forgive me that my formal mentor, Larry Metlin, when he visited me, came through Germany some years ago. I did not ask him where he was going after that because he was about to see Frei, his mentor, that he built the 67 German pavilion in Montreal on the Expo one last time before he left. And I didn't ask, so couldn't ask to go with him. And so that was that. Also, for less detrimental, tragic reasons, but others bad enough. Also, we might not have our exotic escapism expert Susanne as much with us anymore in the coming times, but that's another story here. So hear from her to us the information how we get blessed with German technology on our island, and you got quite excited about that. So I let you guys take on. So there's your weekly German lesson, DeSoto here. Münchner Firma baut Riesenwelle für Surfer auf Hawaii. And you, Matt, are the most knowledgeable. You're our diplomat who can negotiate between the two cultures and the languages because you're most equally sufficient in both. So I leave this now up to you to discuss what we see. We also see a young gentleman here who basically also in his two cultures is checking out both worlds and both things. So what about this wave, guys?
Well, I know about the wave. I can't read that, but I know about the wave. And Matt, maybe you do too. It's what's called a standing wave. And it is something that occurs when water flows over an obstruction continuously, and it makes kind of a bump in the water. And this is in a stream or a river, and it creates a wave that people can surf on. And Germans, not having a lot of waves to surf on, will jump in this river and surf for a little bit, and they take turns jumping in and then pulling out so other people can jump in and surf on the standing wave. And of course, it's freezing cold, so they all have to wear wetsuits all the time, unlike the warm tropical Hawaiian water, where you can also surf a great deal, and you have a lot more waves to surf on than just the one in the river.
And that's pretty good for you. You'd have to visit us there, and us meaning because, Matt, you guys have an office in that city in Munich, so you know this even better and tell us, go more into depth. What's this wave called?
This is on the a location at the end of the southern end of the Englischer Garten in Munich on the east side. That's called Eisbach, where there are some sort of stones that are configured in a way at the bottom of the river that create this kind of standing wave, and it's an extremely popular place for people both to go actually surf and to observe other people surfing. And it's a zero energy wave, which will set up the rest of the conversation.
Exactly.
I mean, there's a lot of energy in it, but it's not coming from any fossil fuels.
It is, as we like to call it, bioclimatic. And again, Semi is checking it out prior to having come here for the second half of the last year. And up there he is with a car he would have loved to have, but then on the right side, the car he then got, but good enough. And the surfboard he got himself. And at the top left is, and Eis, DeSoto and everyone else, not native German, as we almost both are, Matt, Eis means ice. So they do this year round, right? So
they do.
What do we Germans now bring here?
I guess you bring what would probably be described in German as the künstliche Welle, sort of the artificial version that requires what I have to assume is a tremendous amount of power to drive the mechanism that creates basically a wave in a pool, which is ironically something like 200 meters from the beach and the actual waves. So it would be one thing if you put this deep inland where somebody would have no chance of ever seeing a wave as a kind of, say, educational or experience thing. I find it even more absurd that it's literally within visual distance of the actual natural wave.
Yeah.
Hey, let me point out something important here. Two things. One, Germans were the first people to invent artificial wave pools, I believe, back in the 1920s. So they're just going back to their roots of 100 years ago. But Matt, it's even crazier that they're about to open a huge artificial wave pool here on Oahu.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so,
and that wave pool we've been reporting on our other location, which is the one where our founding fathers both come from Saxony and Dresden, the both Günther, Behnisch and Despang. We have there that traditional, which I think we featured in a show, that historic, wave pool. But then again, that is in Germany where you have no waves. I mean, the one on the North Sea where I'm from, the closest to it, and you guys built the Unilever building, Matt, even closer, and the Marco Polo Tower. The waves are not really worth mentioning, naming waves, right? So that makes sense. Or there's this top 10 of the worst environmental, things not to do. That number second is what you said, one could excuse if in the Arab desert, which they did, they built an indoor ski ring, thing, then you can say, well, because they're so deprived, they don't have that. But same as to even disqualify us Germans even more, as it seems to be today's topic here, is number one came from me Northern Germans, because we have this little shrimp, these little crabs, they call it Nordseekrabben. So these are the little shrimp from the North Sea. And although almost 100 years ago, there was a time who was inventing a machine that can peel them, thanks to the absurdity of globalism, these days they get shipped to some cheap labor country somewhere else, and they need to fly them out really fast so they don't go bad, right? And then real people being, paid so little peel them, and then they get shipped back. Go figure, right? So far about, I guess, German sophistication in some ways and responsibilities. So, anyways, so you don't kick us out, DeSoto. We, I guess, defer or distract, so we get to the next slide, and strategically start to contemplate and discuss your culture, DeSoto. But this is something that you found out, Matt, and you called it, which I then put in there at the top part, the larger context. And tell us what that is. And then you guys share the discussion we had about that.
I said the larger context. What was this?
You called it larger context, and it is this. So this is how we look at. I mean, the Museum of Modern Art now looks at Hawaii culture to a certain exhibition here. That's the.
Oh yeah. No, this is apparently there appears to be a kind of exhibition, or certainly there's a video exhibition currently online at MoMA's website called Built Ecologies, architecture and the environment. And one of the first episodes that they, in one of the first episodes in this exhibit, they feature something called Hawaii Nonlinear, where they look at architects and designers who are trying to kind of what they say recover indigenous Honolulu. And so they kind of go through and look at development and sort of phenomenon of these kind of farming pools that used to exist across the island, and other things that have been basically kind of disappeared through whether it was military development or housing or retail and commercial development in the city. But really, it's a quite interesting look at how much the island has evolved over the last 50, 75 years.
Yeah, and it's done by 3 people. One of it happens to be a graduate of our School of Architecture here at UH. That's Sean Connolly, and then it's the Leong brothers, who also have background here in Hawaii, and then but happen to be also on the East Coast where you guys are, and so reflecting about all that. And I came from your buddy Bundit yesterday. We were catching up, and I know he meets you every week, DeSoto. You guys meet up every week, and we talked about that. And he was giving me the Flux magazine from last spring, summer, where Timothy Schuler, we had some conversations with DeSoto about tropical brutalism, was writing about. And this image here is kind of the point that you were making with, and it's been written in there that he says, the state capital, and also Rich Lowe who was one of our guests and many shows were there, and Rich worked with Warneke on the planning part, but the capital was done before. And we just basically said, well, all criticism, rightly so, but at the end, the outcome, or also the intention, because the intention matters, which we said we give Warneke as Howleys, having meant well, and then as DeSoto, we're featuring here the guide we're supposed to write, and we will, together with Bill Chapman and Don Hibbert. In the last one that we had, the Wallpaper Faden guide, which is out of print and was some 10 years ago, they had the project, the Capitol, in there too, and they got straight on to this criticism and said, ever since it was built, people are arguing over, is it too literal or not? And that's, we said we want to throw out, is maybe a good problem to have, or maybe not the worst. And it certainly had good intentions about bridging, here they're calling it the past is present, and bridging basically the past and the present at that time. And the other point I want to make, in an ongoing discussion about that one, what also matters is the perspective. So where does this lead to in the future, right? And for the future. And that, I guess, I hope, with the great artwork, Sean was showing and performing ever since, that he not only gets the chance, but also takes the chance to show that and to prove that in a larger dimension. And I think if you're going up and criticize such a scope of a building of that scale, you better make a counter, cultural proposal. I guess that's sort of my point. You also had a sort of a recommendation to him, right, from your point of view, as you were going through the images he was showing DeSoto, right?
Well, what I wanted to say, in addition to what you've also just said, Martin, is in the pictures that we're looking at right now, I think this all leads back, it ties in both what both you were talking about. The diagram on the left is a depiction of the Hawaiian system of land management and the perceptions that Hawaiian had traditional times of how to divide the land up. And that was the Ahupua'a system, in which you don't just take a plot of land that's rectangular the way we think of now, but instead you think of the land in its entirety, all the way from the shoreline up to the top of the mountains, and you take a long skinny piece of it that encompasses all of those different environments that we have here in the Hawaiian Islands. And that means that you can therefore take in probably great variations in rainfall, temperature, and the different types of elements and the different types of materials you can get from those different levels of environment. So I think it's important to point out that Hawaiians in traditional times exploited their landscape and their environment to the best of their abilities, but in a way that's much more sustainable than we do now when we exploit environments. But in reference to what Matt talked about, one of the major aspects of Hawaiian land management were the creation of fish ponds. And fish ponds are self-sustaining in a way that the fish can come and go on the shoreline, but once they are inside the fish pond and have reached a certain size, they can't get back out into the ocean. So you can harvest them. So they keep themselves going, but humans can take from that resource and use it to sustain themselves. So when Westerners came, a lot of the ways that Hawaiians had managed the landscape were wiped out for things like large-scale agriculture, as well as development, as well as changing not only the shorelines of the Hawaiian Islands through landfill, but also filling in the fish ponds and covering a lot of this stuff up. So when we talk about what the state capitol is trying to represent, it is trying to represent the natural environment of the islands. It's trying to represent the mountains. It's trying to represent volcanoes. It's trying to represent the ocean or the water. It's also trying to represent palm trees. But it also is a reference in the modern brutalist style in the time period from which it was made. So it's referencing the natural environment. It's referencing also, I think, for example, the artificiality of fish ponds created by humans, but which are stocked purely by nature, but it's also putting them all together, referencing also, let's not forget, the Greco-Roman concept of this is what a big building is supposed to look like in the Western world. It's supposed to have columns, it's supposed to have a dome. Well, there are those references, but they are manipulated in a way that doesn't make it look like it just, was a copy of the Acropolis in Athens, but instead it has local elements.
Yeah, and that's, I think we, these images we put in versus the one that Sean and the Leong brothers are using, the Ahupua'a, this is the most commonly used Ahupua'a illustration you find, right? I took a picture of it somewhere. And the other one is by the Steve Gray guy who I reached out, and I'm waiting for his response to include in our book in the intro, because I think he depicts so greatly and humorously the problem we have coming out of, westernizing, which is what Sean and the Leong brothers are criticizing. We do too, but I guess in slightly different ways, which is good, because we're saying, all things, yes, the capital is a manifesto of having taken over Hawaii. America has taken over because the state capital is a state capital. It's an American typology, right? But it's trying to recognize, the past, the present, and the prospective future of Hawaii, in a mid-century modern, in that way, in an interpretive, ambitious and cultivated way, right? So maybe that building doesn't deserve that much to be slammed. That's kind of the discussion we're sort of starting to have going. And getting to the next slide, basically talking about the water you were talking about, because, water, the ponds were also, freshwater fed ponds as well, fish ponds, right? There were. As well, and so then they point out interesting things. They go to where I swim every morning with the turtles in Fort DeRussi, and see at the top right there, you see still stream, although everything is channelized and artificialized and stuff like that, and you still see traces of the actual original down there below that gutter. And around the same time, I had a discussion here with Tom Miller, with whom I did the show way back about my building here, the Waikiki Grand. And he pointed out to me that what I was curious and never asked, shame on me, that in my parking garage here where I park not my car, because that's parking on the street or with you kindly, DeSoto, when I'm not there, but my bicycle, which you see at the bottom left, there's this weird hole in the concrete floor next to it with a little pump. And he pointed out to me, this is a stream too that Ernest Hara, the architect, had also sort of integrated that in the similar kind of awkward way that I guess they didn't know any better back in Furta-Russi as well. The exhibit also then features someone in the same context, which we're very fond of. That is basically James Wines. And James Wines, our friend Ron Lindgren is a big fan of him. And we want to also say to Ron today that we're honoring him, not only me every morning in his, and I have this, and I want to make sure I reuse this every day. So this is a plastic, yes, but I reuse it every day when I go and get myself a coffee there. This is the stirring thing, the stirring stick. So in the Halekulani, I appreciate, his Howley contribution, similar than Warneke, with the best intention and with the best you can do as a Howley to, practice in the Hawaiian practices. But we also want to honor him in having served us and having gone to Vietnam way back, because today is Vietnam War Veterans Day. And we're going to have a parade to DeSoto about 4:00 this afternoon in our front yard here. So that's recognizing. So Ron, hello, and thank you very much for that as well. And again, James Vines, I think, is a great. We talked about him before, Matt, but I think there's a similarity to him, to your guys' firm, and having started out very sort of, philosophically and theoretically. Him as an artist, you guys as architects, very socially engaged and concerned and involved, right, and practicing that in provocative ways. And then upon Stefan, and you guys taking over from there, having added the solar concern, the environmental concern. And the same thing Vines basically did, from his side firm. And in the 70s, he's provocative, revolting, engagements with the big box stores, the mid-sized box stores, for this company's side. And then recently until, now having become a real advocate for environmentally, concerned architecture and demonstrating that in case studies, and I was looking in 2007, he has done a little pavilion building, practicing and shown it as a case study. So that's what I'm hoping, as talented as Sean Connelly is, again, that he gets the chance and takes the chance to push it to that next level. And then we can include him in the book, DeSoto, right? So next slide. Talking systems and systems failures. We also finally had our great Zoom meeting with Thomas Auer, who we see at the top right here. You came, sorry to us, because of the time change, I guess that we didn't. You came in, at the end, but was a very good talk, and we're very in touch ever since, and hoping to do things together. And again, this is around the time where, once again, you remember DeSoto, the shows we did with our friend Ron when his house got flooded and my place got flooded, and here we go again. Same thing happened again. And it's the same thing. Western systems failing, right? This pipe clogging up. And we have, the brave plumbers working all night with me. Thank you guys for that. This is Colin down there at the very bottom, trying to do the very best. And always at the bottom right, I have at the very bottom right, we always have people from similar tropical countries coming and doing the drywall, ironically. That was way back Andre from Brazil. And now I had Ignacio from Mexico and, doing the jobs to covering everything up again, right? So again, just to add to, Sean and the Leong brothers right on point about these Western systems being invasive and imported and just needs to be reconsidered and re-gestalted, as we like to say, importing that German word. And so that gets us back, and us having spent all the show, being philosophical about everything but your project, but as an appetizer and teaser for getting back to it. Next slide and last slide, because we only have 3 minutes left. But we're also phasing out with showing you a Harvard engineering building, and we already said this is the construction document. Technically speaking, that shows it's in its sort of descriptive way, because while, just to share with everyone else how we work as architects, it starts out with the idea, and then there's schematic, and there's developing design, and eventually it becomes CDs, construction documents. And along these lines, they are from more vague, they get to more descriptive, and because otherwise you get that bad thing that we call change orders, which get us in trouble, right? Because the contractor asks for more money, we have to, and we have to justify that in front of the client. So that's what that sort of rational part behind such a drawing here is. But it also, again, just points out to it that it is a double facade, but it is a less invasive one, and it's a more breathable one, and there is no glass involved. Just this morning, DeSoto, they were installing, guess what? Glass guardrails at what used to be our Shorebird, and it's going to be that high-end monkey pot restaurant that we will have to report on later. And I asked the glass guys, and I said, hey, because I saw it was laminated glass, and I said, is it also tempered glass? And I said, yeah, it has to be because of code. So there we go again, very invasive in the whole circular economy and ecology way. While here, I want to throw out as a point of discussion then to be continued or started with next week, Matt, is like, okay, yeah, this is not made from organic material, not from, maybe the 500-mile radius, around where you are, where it was made. But I would say it's a good example to invest the last drips of oil rather than burning them through our exhaust pipes of our combustion fossil mobiles or in air conditioning. Here, he used the last drips of oil to then not having to spend some anymore. Is that a fair way to, or what do you think about that?
It is absolutely. And I think, people talk often about life cycle cost analysis, relative to dollars recovered on the initial investment. We actually did a carbon life cycle analysis on this system to determine how long would it take to save the equivalent amount of carbon that it took to fabricate in reduced operational costs. And that's probably something we can share next week as well, the results of that study, but they were generally quite surprisingly positive.
Let's do that. And we have the perfect picture for that because it shows it in its real manifestation up close. And you will be probably surprised, as we are, how beautiful they are. But as you found out through the last 20 shows, they're not so facially beautiful, but substantially beautiful because they function so beautifully like nature does. And thanks for that entrance singing DeSoto of your birds and your dog behind you, because that's what nature is. So, and so with that, see you guys next week for continuing that discussion. And until then, stay just that, poetically practical and practically poetical. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for watching Think Tech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.